Generation 1 of Pokemon introduced 151 creatures of a variety of types. There's 33 poison types, 32 water types, and 28 normal types, but only 3 ghost types, 2 steel types, and not a single dark type. I'm going to reassign the types of Gen 1 Pokemon to make them as evenly distributed as possible. Looking at how many Pokemon there are of each type, we can quickly see that Gen 1 is pretty unbalanced. The 3 most common types are represented 87 times, meanwhile the 4 least common types are only represented 8 times. To be fair, Dark, Steel and Fairy didn't exist in Gen 1, so they had to be added onto pre-existing Pokemon, but still, types like Dragon, Ghost and Ice have been around since the beginning, so it seems unfair that they would have such a small number of Pokemon. I really don't know why there's only 3 Ghost types, but Dragon and Ice do somewhat make sense. Dragons are supposed to be rare, and there's a rumour that the Ice type was added late into the production of Gen 1, since there's only really one Pokemon who looks particularly icy. Looking at the most common types, normal makes sense, since a lot of Gen 1 Pokemon are just based on animals with no special abilities, and it's rumoured that Nintendo like there to be a lot of fish Pokemon. That's actually the reason why Basculin exists in Gen 5. Someone at Nintendo complained that there weren't enough fish Pokemon, so they made Basculin at the last minute. Poison being number 1 seems really random. Over a third of all poison types across all 9 generations are from Gen 1. Poison usually ranks towards the bottom when you look at new Pokemon of each type per generation, so what makes Gen 1 different? I saw a theory by a YouTuber called Orinim which speculates that there are so many Gen 1 poison types because the dark type didn't exist, so poison is the go-to evil or dangerous type, and that makes a lot of sense. Loads of Gen 1 poison types don't seem particularly poisonous, but just seem generally dangerous like Zubat and Golbat. There's an average of 12.1 Pokemon per type, so when I make my changes, I'll aim for around 12 Pokemon of each type. With all of that out the way, let's get into the type changes. I'll be splitting my type changes into 3 groups. Logical changes that make a lot of sense, reasonable changes which somewhat make sense, and then weak changes which don't have the most solid reasoning behind them, and mainly are just done to make the numbers more even. First for logical changes is Charizard, who's going from Fire Flying to Fire Dragon. This is a really obvious one that people have been talking about for 30 years. It looks like a dragon, it's in the Dragon Egg group, it's used by dragon trainers like Lance and Claire, and it has a dragon type Mega. Next is Fearow, going from normal flying to dark flying. Fearow is a pretty aggressive Pokemon, and the dark type is actually called the evil type in Japanese, which seems like a good fit for Fearow. Also, there's 8 normal flying types in Gen 1, so it makes sense to change them for variety. Speaking of dark types, Ekans and Arbok are going from poison to poison dark. They're pretty evil and intimidating, they're used by the evil Team Rocket, they have darker designs, and they learn dark type attacks like Bite and Crunch by level up. Parasect is going from Bug Grass to Bug Ghost. There's a theory that when Paras evolves, the mushroom on its back kills Paras and takes over, essentially making Parasect a zombie. This is backed up by a few Pokédex entries, and if you look at Paras and Parasect's eyes, you can see that when it evolves, its eyes lose all their colour. Parasect is actually based on a real-world fungus called Tochucaso, or Ophiocordyceps sinensis, which also inspired the game The Last of Us. The real-world fungus does actually take over insects and control their body and mind, leading to their eventual death. Next we have the Geodude line, who are going from rock ground to just rock, because they're rocks. Rock and ground are pretty similar types, so they don't really need to be both. There's also 6 different rock ground types in Gen 1 and no pure rock types, so it makes sense to change these 3. Doduo and Dodrio are going from normal flying to normal ground. They're literally based on dodos, which are flightless birds, and they don't even have wings, so I have no idea why they're flying type. I chose ground to emphasize the fact that they're flightless. Next is Seal, who's going from water to water ice. It evolves into the water ice dugong, and most people probably thought Seal was already water ice. Also, it's used in the ice gym in Johto. Sticking with ice types, Shellder is going from pure water to pure ice, and Cloyster is going from water ice to pure ice. Adding ice type to Shellder is obvious since it evolves into an ice type, but removing the water type from both of them makes slightly less sense. There's a lot of water types in Gen 1, and most of them are just fish who can't really not be water type, so I did have to remove the water type from the least aquatic ones, and that includes these 2 since clams and oysters are technically not fish. Hypno's going from pure Psychic to Psychic Dark. It's a pretty creepy Pokemon since it puts people to sleep and kidnaps children. I decided to just do Hypno and not Drowsy since Drowsy seems a lot more innocent. Execute and Executor are going from Grass Psychic to Pure Grass. A couple of their Pokédex entries make references to telepathy between the different heads, but apart from that I have no idea why they're Psychic type. Next we have Marowak, who's going from pure ground to ground ghost. Cubone gimmick is that it's an orphan wearing the skull of its dead mother, so it would make a lot of sense if Marowak was a ghost type and therefore technically dead. There's also a ghost in the Pokemon Tower which turns out to be a Marowak. I've always thought it was a bit strange how that ghost is not actually a ghost type. Magikarp is going from water to normal since it's a pretty boring, useless Pokemon who doesn't even learn any water-type attacks. Gyarados is dropping both its water and flying types to become pure dragon. Like Charizard, this is an obvious one that's been talked about for many years, and Gyarados is used by several dragon-type trainers. Another Pokemon gaining the dragon type is Aerodactyl, going from rock flying to rock dragon. It's used by Lance, it looks pretty dragonish, and there were only 3 dragon types to begin with, so we need to add as many as we can. Also, Aerodactyl could easily just be given the ability Levitate to make up for its lost flying typing. Next is the reasonable changes, which aren't as obvious as the last group, but still have a decent justification. Bulbasaur and Ivysaur are going from grass poison to pure grass. They don't look particularly poisonous, they don't learn many poison type attacks, and we need a lot less poison types. I decided to keep Venusaur as grass poison because Blastoise is going from water to water steel, so each of the fully evolved starters have 2 types. Obviously I chose steel because of Blastoise's cannons, which to be honest isn't the strongest reasoning, but we only started with 2 steel types, so we're gonna have to take what we can get. Next, Nidoking and Nidoqueen are going from Poison Ground to Poison Dragon. They're pretty strong, tough-looking Pokemon who do somewhat resemble reptiles, and I think them being Dragon-type makes just as much sense as them originally being Ground. Ninetales is going from Fire to Fire Ghost. According to multiple Pokédex entries, it has mystical supernatural powers, and Vulpix is usually found in spooky places. You can find Vulpix near the Pokemon Tower, Johto's Ghost Gym, Mount Pyre, and the Watchtower Ruins, which are all full of ghost types. Jigglypuff and Wigglytuff are going from normal fairy to pure fairy. They're counterparts to Clefairy and Clefable who became pure fairy types, and normal types are generally based on animals, while these guys are based on balloons. Vileplume is going from grass poison to grass dark. Oddish can usually be found at night time, Vileplume has a dark colour scheme, and Karen uses one in the Johto Elite Four. I also think making it a dark type helps to contrast it against Blossom, who's associated with brightness and the sun. Meowth and Persian are going from normal to dark. If there was one Pokemon to symbolise wrongdoing and mischief, it would be Meowth. Both Meowth and Persian are used by Team Rocket in the anime. They're quite stealthy and sneaky, and they learn a decent number of dark-type attacks by level up. Bellsprout, Weepinbell, and Victreebel are going from grass poison to just grass. They're some of the least poisonous poison types, and there's already loads of grass poison types but only one pure grass type, so I think it would help to add some variety. More Pokemon losing their poison type are Tentacool and Tentacruel, going from water poison to water dark. I know they're based on poisonous jellyfish, but they're also shown to be pretty evil, and they don't scream poison type to me. Even more Pokemon losing their poison type are Ghastly, Haunter, and Gengar, going from ghost poison to ghost dark. I think if dark was a type in Gen 1, they would have all been dark types instead of poison. All of them have evil and sinister tendencies according to their Pokédex entries, and they're also generally pretty dark and creepy. Some Pokemon gaining the ghost type are Voltorb and Electrode, going from electric to electric ghost. This one might seem random, but there's an old theory that they're Pokeballs possessed by ghosts. Voltorb and Haunter have the exact same eyes, so the theory is that some Haunters made the short journey from the Pokemon Tower to the power plant, where they possessed and took control of Pokeballs and eventually became the Pokemon Voltorb. Next is Kangaskhan, who's going from normal to ground fighting. The ground type is because it's pretty rugged and Giovanni uses one who's a ground type trainer, and the fighting type is because Kangaskhan is known to be pretty aggressive when it comes to defending its baby. Also, kangaroos fight each other in a way that looks like they're boxing. Starmie's going from water psychic to water fairy. There's a lot of overlap between psychic and fairy types since they're both used to represent all things magical, but the fairy type does lean a bit more towards Pokemon who are extraterrestrial, and Starmie is said to have come from outer space. Tauros is going from normal to normal fighting, since pretty much every Pokédex entry says something about it being aggressive, rowdy, and violent. Lapras is going from Water Ice to Dragon Ice. It's inspired by the Loch Ness Monster, which plays into the Dragon type's mythical energy. It looks pretty reptilian, and it can learn a lot of Dragon type attacks, like Dragon Breath, Dragon Cheer, Dragon Dance, Dragon Pulse, Dragon Rage, and Outrage. The next one is a bit of a strange one, but Kabuto, Kabutops, Omanyte, and Omastar are going from Rock Water to Rock Ghost. The reasoning for this one should be obvious. They're fossils, so they're dead Pokemon brought back to life. I think Kabuto and Kabutops losing their water type does make a bit more sense, since they don't look particularly aquatic. But I did decide to change all 4, mainly just because there's a lot of water types to get rid of. Finally for this group, Mew is going from Psychic to Fairy. As I said before, there's a lot of overlap between these two types. I feel like it looks a bit more fantastical than other Psychic types like Alakazam and Mewtwo, and I think its shy, playful nature fits a bit better with the Fairy typing. The final group consists of all the changes that make the least sense and have weak justifications. First of all, Metapod, Kakuna, and Beedrill are all gaining a Steel type. So Metapod goes from Bug to Bug Steel, and Kakuna and Beedrill go from Bug Poison to Bug Steel. The justification for this is that Metapod and Kakuna are hard cocoons, and Beedrill has metallic looking stingers. Something that I do like about this is that a Steel typing would give Beedrill something to help it keep up with Butterfree, who's the better bug by miles. Another Pokemon gaining a Steel type is Sandslash. Its claws look metallic, and to be honest, we just needed a lot more Steel types. It actually has a similar amount of metal compared to Lucario, a real Steel type, but I do think this justification is one of the weakest. Next, Oddish and Gloom are going from Grass Poison to Pure Grass. They're not massively poisonous. According to Pokedex entries, Oddish is a pretty generic plant, and Gloom just smells. I mainly made this change since they're some of the least poisonous poison types. Venonat and Venomoth are going from Bug Poison to Bug Fairy. These are some more poison types who don't fit the poison type that well. They seem to be more magical than poisonous. They learn a few psychic type attacks by level up, and Sabrina, a psychic trainer, uses Venomoth. But I did have to give them the Fairy type instead, since we don't need any more psychic types, and in terms of magical types, Fairy is the next best thing. I did just say that we don't need more Psychic types, but two Pokemon gaining the Psychic type are Psyduck and Golduck, going from Pure Water to Pure Psychic. These two becoming Psychic types makes a lot of sense, and if they became Water Psychic, I would have put them in the logical changes group. As I've mentioned, there's a lot of Water types that we need to get rid of, and lots of Water types who are just fish with no special qualities. So if some Water types had to lose their Water typing, I think these two make more sense than Goldeen or Poliwag, for example. More Pokemon losing their Water type are Slowpoke and Slowbro, going from Water Psychic to Ice Psychic. I don't think the Ice type makes that much sense for these two, but honestly, neither does the Water type. They don't look very aquatic, and I think they're based on lizards, but it's hard to tell. I decided on Ice since they're found in the Seafoam Islands, and Lorelei, an Ice type trainer, uses a Slowbro. One change that seems to make sense to everyone except me is Farfetch'd going from normal flying to fighting flying. I've played a lot of ROM hacks where people change Farfetch'd into a fighting type, and I honestly have no idea why. A couple of Pokedex entries mention it fighting and using its leak like a sword, but lots of Pokemon are said to fight each other in the Pokedex. I don't understand why seemingly everyone except me has decided he should be a fighting type, but obviously I'm the odd one out here. Krabby and Kingler are going from water to steel. They have pretty high defenses, and crabs are known for their hard shells. They also technically aren't fish, and crabs can survive for a couple of days on land. If anyone watching this thinks this reasoning is really weak, I challenge you to find 10 other Gen 1 Pokemon that could become steel types. Next, Chansey is going from normal to fairy. It's pink and cute, it heals other Pokemon, and it has really high special defense, so it sounds like a fairy type to me. I think Chansey potentially could have become a fairy type in Gen 6, but I also do think that staying normal type makes sense too. Horsey and Seadra are going from water to dragon. They evolve into a dragon type, and the Dra in Seadra's name seems to come from the word dragon. Finally, Porygon is going from normal to electric steel. It's a digital Pokemon, so it makes sense to have types that relate to technology. I don't like giving it the exact same typing as Magnemite and Magneton, but I think it's the only Pokemon that I realistically could add electric to. And we needed more steel types. Looking at the updated type chart, we can see that every type now ranges from 9 to 15 Pokemon, which is a massive change from the original 0 to 33. Water is the most common type, which makes sense, since I found it really difficult to find water types who could lose that typing. Water is followed by normal, poison, flying, and dark, with 14 each. Obviously we started with a lot of normal and poison types, and flying used to be the fourth most common type, with 19, so it makes sense for those three to still be at the top. What's surprising is dark being one of the most common types. I think this goes to show that at least a handful of Gen 1 Pokemon probably should have gained the dark type when it was introduced in Gen 2. Dark was also the easiest type to move poison types into, since poisoning other Pokemon is inherently pretty evil. Ice has the least Pokemon with 9, followed by Electric, Steel and Fairy with 10. I found Ice and Electric to be the most difficult types to build up. Very few Pokemon look particularly icy or electrical who aren't already those types. Fairy type, for example, is generally used for cute or mystical Pokemon, so it was easy to add the Fairy type onto Pokemon like Mewtwo or Starmie. But Ice and Electric types pretty much always look like Ice and Electric types, so I really struggled to find any other Pokemon who could gain those types. Normal and Poison were really easy types to get down, since normal types have quite generic designs that can easily be interpreted as ground or fighting, for example, and I feel like the Poison type was randomly slapped onto a lot of Gen 1 Pokemon, so it made sense to take it off quite a few of them. The only types that were completely unchanged were Fire, Rock, and Bug. They all started and ended with 11 or 12 Pokemon. Fire and Bug would have been difficult types to add or take away, since Fire types and Bug types generally always look like Fire types and Bug types, but I think Rock would have been an easy one to work with. It's so similar to Ground that it would have made a lot of sense to either make ground types into rock types or rock types into ground types. I don't think every generation needs to introduce the exact same number of Pokemon of each type. but I do wish the type distribution was more themed to the region. Most generations introduce a majority of water, grass, flying and normal types, regardless of their geography, but it would have been interesting if Hoenn gave us a majority of fire types, since it's a hot and tropical region, or if Sinnoh gave us a majority of ice types, since it has a colder climate. I think that would help to add a more unique identity to each region, instead of all 9 regions just being places where fish, birds, plants and mammals live. Thanks for watching, and hopefully, I'll see you next time.